Have you ever caught yourself sounding exactly like your mother during an argument with your partner? Or notice your partner withdrawing in the same way your father did whenever conflict arose? These aren't coincidences. Hi, I'm Dr. Gloria Lee, and after 27 years helping numerous couples, I discovered something profound about why relationships get stuck in repetitive patterns, and it goes back to your earliest experiences with love. What most people don't realize is that when you're in a relationship, there are actually 6 people in the room. The 2 of you, plus both sets of parents whose relationship patterns you've unconsciously absorbed as your template for love. These aren't just fleeting influences. They've become encoded in your nervous system as automatic responses that get triggered when you feel threatened, anxious, or insecure in your relationship. This intergenerational transmission of relationship patterns show up in 3 key ways. First, in how you communicate. If your parents criticize each other, you might find yourself being critical or trying to please your partner to avoid criticism. If your parents avoid a conflict, you likely do too, or you push your partner to resolve issues. The second way is in your expectations of what relationships should look like. If your home was emotionally distant, avoidance might actually feel more normal to you than closeness. If your home was conflictual, chaos might feel like intimacy. And third is the roles you take on. Were you the peacekeeper in your family? The hero child who took care of everyone's feelings, the person who withdrew to avoid conflict, the invisible child who had no needs. These patterns follow you into adult relationships, often unconsciously. The most common pattern I see in my practice, representing about 70 to 75% of couples, is the anxious-avoidant dance. One partner, typically with an anxious attachment style, pursues connection, wanting more closeness, communication, and reassurance. The other partner, typically with an avoidant attachment style, withdraws when emotional intensity rises, needing space and autonomy. This creates a devastating dance where each partner triggers the other's deepest fears. The anxious partner feels abandoned and pursues harder, which makes the avoidant partner feel suffocated and withdraw more, which increases the anxious partner's fear of abandonment. And round it goes. What's fascinating is that we're often drawn to partners who help us recreate the emotional patterns we experienced growing up. So if you had a distant parent you long to connect with, you might be attracted to someone who's emotionally unavailable. If you had an intrusive parent, you might choose someone who is controlling or demanding. Based on the work of relationship therapist Terry Real, when we're triggered in relationships, we fall into certain positions on a grid. On one axis is how we handle boundaries. Are we walled off or boundaryless? On the other axis is how we position ourselves in relation to others. Are we one up, a position of superiority, or one down, a position of inferiority? When triggered, those with anxious attachment often become boundaryless, either boundaryless and one down, so desperate for connection, willing to do anything to keep the relationship, or boundaryless and one up, controlling and demanding. Whereas those with an avoidant attachment typically become walled off, either walled off and one up, contemptuous, passive-aggressive, or walled off and one down, withdrawn and resigned. These positions directly mirror the messages we received in childhood about our worth and lovability. Were you falsely empowered? You're responsible for my happiness? Disempowered? You can never do anything right? Abandoned? You're on your own? Or intruded upon? Your needs and boundaries don't matter. The good news is that once you recognize these patterns, you can change them. Here's how. First, identify your parents' relationship dynamic. How did they handle conflict? How did they show or not show affection? How did they communicate about needs and emotions? Then, notice the parallels in your own relationship. Are you recreating aspects of their dynamic? Are you reacting against it by doing the opposite extreme? Next, when you feel triggered, pause in that critical 30-second window before you react. Take 3 deep breaths. Ground yourself in the present by feeling your feet on the floor. Then ask yourself, is this my authentic response, or am I being triggered by something from my past? This creates space for your wiser adult part to choose differently than your reactive younger part. Finally, share this understanding with your partner, not as an accusation, you're just like my father, but as an insight. I know I get really anxious when you're quiet because it reminds me of how my father would withdraw before a big conflict. Can you help me understand what's actually happening for you when you get quiet? What makes this work so powerful is that when you heal these patterns, you're simultaneously healing 3 generations. First, you're healing your past, addressing wounds that your parents couldn't heal for themselves. Second, you're transforming your present relationship by breaking the cycle of reactivity. And third, you're creating a new legacy for future generations, whether that's your children or anyone who comes after you. I've seen this understanding transform seemingly hopeless relationships. One couple I worked with had been stuck in a pursue-withdraw pattern for years. She was constantly asking for more connection, which made her partner feel inadequate, and withdraw, which made her then panic and pursue harder. When they realized that they were recreating the exact dynamics from both of their families of origin, her mother was constantly seeking attention from her distant father, and his father avoided all emotional expression. Everything changed. They could suddenly see their pattern clearly, not as a character flaw in either of them, but as an unconscious repetition of what they had witnessed growing up. With this awareness, they began to pause in that critical 30-second window, recognize that when they were being triggered by these old wounds, and what would happen is that they could choose a different response now. So instead of criticizing him for withdrawing, she could say, I'm feeling anxious about our connection right now. And instead of shutting down, he could say, I need a moment to process, but I'm not leaving emotionally. The transformation wasn't immediate, but over time, they created an entirely new relationship pattern, one based on current needs rather than old wounds. Understanding and changing these intergenerational patterns is some of the most powerful work you can do for your relationship. It's not just about improving communication or learning conflict resolution skills. It's about healing the deeper wounds that drive these patterns in the first place. If you're ready to explore your own relationship patterns and create lasting change, I invite you to join my upcoming couples retreat, where we'll work together to identify these unconscious patterns and develop the skills to transform them. Comment retreat below to learn more about this transformative experience. Space is limited to ensure that each couple receives the personalized attention needed for this deep work. Remember, you're not destined to repeat your parents' relationship patterns. You have the power to create something entirely new, not just for yourself, but for the generations to come. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.